and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right, folks. This is going to be a fight between Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. But see, the bigger picture is about censorship, free speech, who can speak and who cannot speak. And yes, I'll be talking again about the New York governor calling for Big Brother to spy in on you. And also, hey, Nikki Haley, that's not her name, who also is in favor of making sure that people are verified and, held accountable for what they can say. And then, of course, you're going to have individuals in this follow-up. Because, see, the thing is, there's a bigger story between Candace Owens versus Ben Shapiro. It's more of what kind of future are we walking into to where now everyone has to be careful what they say and cannot say. Who should be allowed to speak and who should not be allowed to speak. So let's get started with finding out how this all got started, because apparently Ben Shapiro is a little angry. He's a little furious. He's upset that Candace Owens was, she made some remarks about Israel. So I'll pull up this video here. Shout out to Glenn Greenwald, who tweeted this out. Conservative calling for the firing of real Candace Owens from the Daily Wire due to her heresy on Israel. And hey, somebody saying, there it is. I've been saying it for years that hiring Candace Owens is one massive mistake the Daily Wire has made. I generally hope they rectify it. It looks like Ben Shapiro has finally had enough. Well, here's Ben Shapiro talking real fast about why he's upset.
Yes, the question is about Candace Owens. I think her behavior during this is disgraceful. Without a doubt. Yeah, and she still works for my company. And I think she's been absolutely disgraceful. I think that her faux sophistication on these particular issues has been ridiculous. It's not faux sophistication, it's ridiculous. Everybody can see the moves that she's making and the things that she's saying, and I find them disreputable.
All right, so he's a little upset, but let's talk about why he's upset. Let's talk about these remarks that Candace Owens made. Now, this is just only a small excerpt of what she said. It's only about 5 minutes long, but I will be sure to have her speak out in some of her entirety. I will pause here and there in the video. And I just want everyone to remember, look, we all have our opinions, perspectives, and points of view, but there's a bigger story here. And that is, as we enter into this day and age, and dare I say it, we're probably already in it, of what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, just remember, when you want to silence and suppress somebody, censor somebody for their perspective and point of view, the same can be done to you. And I was definitely against anyone who, be they progressive or conservative, libertarian or socialist, who are being censored. Since Harlan's Media got started, we've seen so many people get censored, and I'm against censorship. And I think it's only fair that we hear some of Candace Owens' remarks. You may not like them, or some of you might agree with them, but I think it's important that we hear her perspective. And yes, as someone who's been in media, she has a right to share her opinion, whether you like them or not. But this is also spelling trouble further on down the road when I play the next few videos, and why we should be just a tiny bit, maybe sort of concerned about what lies in store if we are on this pathway of further suppression, censorship, and who should be allowed to speak. Because when you have a system of who's allowed to speak, well, does that mean who's allowed to have a job or own a home or own a car? What are we doing here precisely?
There are a lot of people in America that are sitting here going, okay, well, can you answer why Jews are so special? Because as white people in this country on university campuses, we are being taught that we are not allowed to have a voice. We have had to endure exactly what you're talking about, BLM. We've endured much worse than you have because it's in the actual textbooks. We are being told that we are systematically racist, that we are born wrong because of the color of our skin. And if we say anything, we'll lose everything. This is the typical experience on white campuses. So people, this is not whataboutism. This is like actually what we have been fighting for years. So it sort of arrived as, I think, for a lot of Americans, a surprise when they're saying, well, now that it's about Israel, which is something that's overseas, we need to, hand these university professors, we need to do something about this issue. Why weren't we trying to correct course on this issue? Why weren't donors pulling their funding out of these universities? Why weren't these same things being said for these last, I would say, 8 years of rampant BLM, white man can't do anything right, actively being taught in the classrooms? So there are people that are asking that question. Now, what I have said is that explicit calls for genocide, which was stunning to me to see that in Congress, are completely wrong. It is frankly crazy. I have not weighed in on the IDF's response in the same way that I have consistently said through every war, Ukraine and Russia, I don't want to be involved. I have said I don't want to be involved in Israel and Palestine, all these conflicts. my consistency seems to offend people, right? But I haven't made a single tweet or a single comment on IDF's response in Palestine. I haven't said a single thing about that.
Now, I do want to be very clear here. I do agree with Candace Owens, especially in regards to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Hey, can we just have a ceasefire? But I think it's also important when you have protests on campus, on college campuses, which is something that happens. I mean, if you've gone to college, yes, you've seen your fair share of protesters. You've seen people speak out against injustice. I mean, it happens on all college campuses here in America, if you can afford to go one, which is a whole other story altogether. But people are allowed to gather. And yes, there should be counter protests as well. But when you have a system now, especially with the aftermath of October 7th, that is now going after anyone that's been critical of Israel and the bombing of Gaza, you create a situation in which it is impossible to leave. Because then all of a sudden people's careers or academic futures are being put at risk because they chose to speak out. Everyone has the fundamental right for the First Amendment here in America, the right to protest, the right to gather, the right to speak out. That is what this whole shindig is supposed to be about, free speech, right? And yes, there are bad people. I get it that there are bad people out there. But for the majority of these protests, what they're calling for is a ceasefire, peace in our time. I don't know. Is that too controversial? Is that the bridge too far? Apparently, for many, it's very triggering.
I've said it is always sad when a child dies. And the lack of humanity that I have seen from both sides has been very troubling for me. But to say that I have to weigh in and suddenly wave an Israeli flag and say things that, because you decide that you get to use my platform because it's personal to you, how is that fair to people? How is that fair? And then to go a step further and to suggest that it might be anti-Semitic, which is basically silence is violence, as a leftist tactic, to me feels very extreme.
This is not about a geopolitical dispute between Israel and Palestine. This is about an ideological mission to rid the world of Israel and the Jews. That's what I think people misunderstand.
Yeah, well, Jews live very comfortably in the United States of America, so they're not going to be. I mean, obviously, Jews
lived comfortably in Germany before Germany too. They did. Doctors, lawyers,
really struggle. I really struggle when people start using, things that have happened in the past that are abhorrent, like slavery, to say that, like, if this doesn't happen, then slavery is going to be back, or if this doesn't happen, then it's going to be the Holocaust too. I think there's a lot more meaningful chatter and discussion that we can have. We don't have to resort to that kind of,
History repeats itself if you forget it. You have to be conscious, and Jews especially,
unfortunately, history is kind of repeating itself. It has been repeating itself for quite some time, as there have been numerous horrific situations, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War, in which people have been ethnically cleansed, people have been horribly attacked, displaced from their lands, etc., etc. We've seen history repeat itself. If not here in America, somewhere else. So there's always that thing to consider. And people need to remember that. And what's really upsetting a lot of individuals, even as I speak right now, when we look at the overall crisis in Gaza, when we look at the overall situation in Gaza as we speak, I think it's important for us to look at this right now, because unfortunately, it looks like the number is still rising. Here's what we have here. 11,078 people. And there are people protesting this, calling it out. Let's continue on with the rest of this video.
I'm a grandchild of all four of my grandparents are Holocaust survivors.
So what do you make of the Holocaust survivors and the Jewish people in New York City that are protesting on behalf of Palestine? That's a great question.
I think that there's a very strange, bizarre, it's the same people that you would condemn as the white people who bowed down to BLM protesters, who hate themselves and feel a certain sense of guilt. They feel a certain sense of, I think a lot of the ideologies on the woke left, to the extent that things are good and prosperous and virtuous, they condemn as bad. And the things that are broken, morally and depraved, they see as good. This is the lens by which the far left views things. And I think these Jews that have...
No. Look, there's a lot of people who are protesting because they don't want to see another hospital or refugee center being bombed. I would encourage perhaps maybe both these two wonderful people to maybe, I don't know, speak to Norman Finkelstein about this crisis. Norman's family was also in the concentration camps. Or he said, hey, have Bassem Youssef on the show. He'll be sure to lighten it up and explain what's happening there in Gaza and in the West Bank. It's just something to consider, hopefully, maybe, because people who are protesting in the streets right now are seeing a government indifferent to civilians, women, children, the elderly, being bombed, being hit with artillery, being shot at by snipers. It's pretty reasonable why there are protesters and why Jewish Voices for Peace is calling for peace and a ceasefire. But yet that is a bridge too far for many politicians, because both Democratic and Republican politicians, well, they take corporate lobby groups from Israeli adjacent groups. So it's quite concerning. No one's self-hating. People want there to be peace and a ceasefire because this war is ridiculous. And there are a lot of questions that people have in regards to what happened on October 7th. Further investigation needs to take place. So we find out really, how come Israel didn't see that haymaker coming? And so much more. I mean, you got these big walls, watchtowers, drones, surveillance systems, intel services. You know, how come that didn't happen? Just questions upon questions.
To be politically far left and maybe are not that connected to their Judaism, or are maybe culturally Jewish, but don't have a strong Jewish upbringing. Not to say that politics and being a Jew go hand in hand with the same political identity. But my point is, just like the white people who in mass were bowing down and feeling guilty about themselves simply for being white, or people who feel guilty for being successful, or the anti-capitalists who say anyone who has something is necessarily bad. Some people buy into that sort of masochism of hating themselves to gain favor with people who want their destruction. It's really sick.
So would you say that in order to be a Christian, a Catholic, you have to support the Vatican? Like, you can't be a Jewish person that doesn't support the state of Israel. Is that what you're implying? Yeah, well, because I have Jewish friends that are pro-Israel, and I have Jewish friends that say that they just do not support Zionism at all, and that they think that the creation of the Israel state is something that is political and has nothing to do with actually the Jewish faith at all. And so I listen to both of those sides. I try to hear both of those voices, and I don't think having a different perspective makes any person less Jewish. And I think it's been problematic to hear, and this is not you, this isn't a criticism towards you, when they say, well, to even have that perspective makes you not Jewish, because it's so reminiscent for me of me saying I'm a Black conservative, and they say, well, even to be a Black Republican, it's
Now, look, we're all going to have different perspectives and points of view. I get it. And it's important that we have this discussion. Apparently, for Ben Shapiro, this is just way too triggering. Well, this is show business. This is media. People have a right to speak out as much as we can until the final nail on free speech, its coffin, is finally put in. And then that's that. It's over. However, the reason why I brought up this Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens back and forth, this little fight, is because it's more than that. It's more than just two individuals who have large social media followings talking. It's about the fact that all of us involved, because we all consume social media, and all of us have a perspective, and all of us have a right to chime in and add in our 2 cents, as you should. The problem is now, especially with the protests that are happening on college campuses or in various cities who are calling for a ceasefire, you have individuals now who go on social media who say statements like this. Jonathan Greenbelt of the ADL argues that the Department of Education, the IRS, and the FBI, hey, what could possibly go wrong? Need to get involved in regulating speech on college campuses and investigating pro-Palestinian organizations to ensure they're not providing support to Hamas. So, regulating speech on college campuses, investigating pro-Palestinian organizations. Say it with me for the people in the far, far back. What could possibly go wrong? So much could go wrong. So much can go wrong. And unfortunately, when you have individuals who talk like this, people who want to regulate speech, that means, well, who else will be regulated? What other kind of organizations will be looked into? Who else will be put on the chopping block? You see, we're not all going to agree with each other. I get it. But we have that fundamental right for the First Amendment to speak out, as should college students, as should anyone. No matter what generation you're part of, you have a right to speak. Your opinion should be heard. And yes, I believe that the world is filled with generally good people. And good speech will always outmaneuver and knock out hate speech and vile speech. I believe in the compassion. It's as shocking that it is that good will prevail, and that those who actually speak out against injustice will stand out against and stand stronger than those who speak for hate and violence. But unfortunately, when you have calls like this, people's academic or economic or social careers over because what? They attended a rally?
We fight all forms of hate. But I think in this moment, we need to stop this constant sort of conflation of the two. The college campuses are on fire right now. The ADL's tracked 832 incidents across the country, almost 30 a day over the month after the Gaza.
Is the president's program enough to try to counteract that?
Look, the president has been strong and supportive, and we are so appreciative of that, but we need more. We need the Department of Education to take proactive action to get these universities to do something. There have been good signs, but we need more. I'll also tell you, we need the right governmental authorities like the IRS and the FBI to make sure that the national organizations aren't providing material support for Hamas, which is a foreign terror organization. That needs to happen right away.
Only today, and I don't know which organizations, but only today, the U.S. government was sanctioning Hamas leaders and Hamas.
So when you have somebody, and we're just going to rewind that just a little bit, calling for the IRS on corporate media, calling for the Department of Education, calling for every single institution to look into people, you're saying to everyone, especially on BSDNC, that whatever they say and do will be tracked, that people should be afraid and be quiet, because this opens up so much abuse of power by our government officials, by anyone that could dictate how we live. And let's face it, in this economy where it's a struggle to get by, this is just one more oppressive kick to the stomach.
IRS and the FBI to make sure that the national organizations aren't providing material support for Hamas, which is a foreign terror organization. That needs to happen right away.
Only today, and I don't know which organizations, but only today, the U.S. government was sanctioning Hamas leaders and Hamas as an organization, the UK and the US jointly.
Which is so important. And I guess the last thing I would say is we need our university presidents to show some spine. It's long past the time for them to find the backbone, Andrea, to step up and speak out. Imagine that we now have more than 10 times the number of anti-Semitic incidents on campuses in the last month versus the same period last year. That's 1,000% increase. University presidents should realize their Jewish students don't feel safe because they're not. And
Now, why is this also another problem? Why is this another problem? Unfortunately, with many of us witnessing this idea of going after individuals and calling for regulation, it also leads to something like this taking place. I played this on yesterday's show. Here's the governor of New York remarking on increased violence and talking about how having the government spy in on you, do surveillance, and collecting data to get your identity. Because then what you say on social media can be used against you. What you record, what you live stream. We should be concerned and afraid.
Also, we're very focused on the data we're collecting from surveillance efforts. What's being said on social media platforms. And we have launched an effort to be able to counter some of the negativity and reach out to people when we see hate speech being spoken about on online platforms. Our media analysis, our social media analysis unit has ramped up its monitoring of sites to catch incitement to violence, direct threats to others. And all this is in response to our desire, our strong commitment to ensure that not only do New Yorkers be safe, but they also feel safe, because personal security is about everything for them. As I said, no one walking down the street or in a subway should feel they have to hide any indications of what their religious beliefs are. We expect to see people celebrating their lives walk.
The problem is when you start collecting people's data, well, when does it stop? Whose data are you collecting? How can you identify who's saying what? And how the algorithm or people will interpret what is hate speech or violence. So many groups, be it libertarians, socialists, Greens, independents, activist groups, across the political spectrum, no matter what generation you're part of, we have seen how people are put on the chopping block and how our data has been collected against us, how our identities are being stolen, how we are being put into a system. And yes, everything we say is being recorded. Everything could potentially be used against us. When you create a system of surveillance and collecting data, how are you able to determine what a bad guy looks like? Who is a bad guy? What does the villain look like? Well, at least according to the establishment, if you speak out against it, you're the bad guy. You're this week's flavor villain. Because here we have Nikki Haley. That's right, bringing in Nikki Haley. That's not her name. This is a retweet from the Libertarian Party where Nikki Haley, in this short 30-second plus clip video, says every person on social media should be verified by their name because of national security. Say it with me, folks. What could possibly go wrong? See, I brought up that video of Candace Owens versus Ben Shapiro because Ben was upset of Candace Owens speaking out. But, she was making some interesting points here and there. But she has a right for an opinion. And we all consume social media. And I've seen on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, Odyssey, Kick, Twitch, no matter what the platform there is, Patreon, etc., we see how people share their opinions and perspectives and points of view, as they should. Because what I hope, when all of you watch Hard Lens Media, you watch our show, but then you also check out other perspectives and points of view as well, so you can get a well-rounded opinion. And yes, when it comes time to speak out against injustice or corruption, you have a right to speak out. But that should not be used against you, because what the libertarians right here is, AKA, we want to be able to find you, arrest you, censor you, and you know who we can label as an enemy of the state. Beware out there, folks. Keep your heads on a swivel.
When I get into office, the first thing we have to do, social media accounts, social media companies, they have to show America their algorithms. Let us see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second thing is every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots. And then you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say.
Accountability.
And they know their pastor and their family member is going to see it. It's going to help our kids, and it's going to help our country.
No, it won't. Because when you have people being categorized, having their data collected, being put into a block, it's easier then for the system to perhaps ruin said person's life. So if you're against a politician who's corrupt, no matter what office they hold, be it local, county, city, state, or federal, well, they could ruin your life by what you post on social media. That goes for anyone in a position of power. They're telling you to be careful what you say, or else. Don't speak out, or else. Don't share your opinion, or else, unless it's approved by the state. Follow orders and obey. Don't tell jokes. Don't be sarcastic. Don't give a critical analysis of a horrific conflict that's taking place. We all should be concerned. So how do we end this segment? We can at least end it on a humorous note while we're still allowed to have comedy and be sarcastic. Because this conflict between Israel and Palestine is revealing so much in regards to how the establishment wants to control the narrative and how we're all divided at each other's throats. Unfortunately, this conflict between Israel and Palestine is only leading to the conflict further on down the road. 11,000 plus people dead now. We have to be better. So let's at least end it with how we got started, with Candace Owens making a shocking endorsement for Nikki Haley, of all people. Shout out to Jackson Hinkle. He's done some phenomenal work. Candace Owens just destroyed Ben Shapiro by endorsing Nikki Haley for president of Israel. Goodness gracious, Cretaceous. We got to have some comedy. So let's enjoy it.
Well, I am here today to endorse Nikki Haley for president of Israel. I think she's earned that. I think Bibi Netanyahu is going through a very bad time right now, support for Israel has virtually collapsed socially. If you're paying attention to the trends and you're paying attention to what people are watching, you're paying attention to the protests. And the one person that I think is capable of getting it back is Nikki Haley, with enough money from foreign interest lobbies. So there it is, guys. I'm endorsing Nikki Haley, president of Israel. Well,
now, with the way the Republican primary is turning out for Nikki Haley, let's face it, Trump's got it in the bag. That isn't open for debate. But I will say this, that was pretty funny by Candace Owens. And she's not kidding in regards to just how many people are speaking out against the bombing of Gaza and the ongoing death toll that's taking place there. We have to be better. We have to be smarter. We have to be more compassionate to each other. Because this right here, unfortunately, if we have censorship continue to run amok, none of us are going to speak out. None of us are going to have a voice. Censorship's never the answer. Deplatforming does not work. And being categorized by a government, being put into a group, or either that having our data collected, only takes away our individuality. This has played a pivotal role in our society. Social media. Many of us need it. Many of us need to speak out. Many of us use it for businesses, etc. But this is how the world is. What kind of nightmare are we walking into to where now we have to be careful what we say? What kind of stress that puts a society under? We have a right to speak out. And if we don't use our First Amendment right here, especially in this country, and yes, there are going to be groups that you disagree with, very soon, none of us will be allowed to speak. And that is a future I don't want. And neither should any of you. Free speech now, free speech forever.